So vanaand gaan ons 'n bietjie kyk na die kudde-analise verslag. Ken jou data deur jou kudde. Net so 'n bietjie agtergrond hieroor. Hierdie inisiatief het eintlik voortgespruit uit 'n versoek van ons kleinvee advieskomitee 'n paar jaar gelede. En so het Jason toe vir ons hierdie kudde-analise verslag ontwikkel vir die vleisbeesteelers en ook vir ons kleinveeteelers in 2022. Nou hierdie verslag is enige tyd op Logix beskikbaar en julle kan dit self gaan aflaai en dan self ook die periode stel van die data wat julle ingesluit wil hê in hierdie analise. Dit is geautomatiseer of die default is gestel op 'n 10 jaar periode, maar jy kan dit gaan verander, laat dit selfs net 1 jaar of 2 jare se data insluit, of selfs om jou al die data wat op Logix beskikbaar is van jou kudde te kan sien. Wat julle egter net bietjie in gedagte moet onthou, is dat veranderinge wat aangebring word aan julle kudde se data op Logix, gaan eers op die volgende week in hierdie Logix verslag verskyn, want ons het programme wat op Sondae-aande hardloop, ons noem dit die Sondag Stats, wat dan al die veranderinge wat deurgegee is in ons databasis opdateer. Dit is veral ten opsigte van inventaris veranderinge wat dan eers die volgende week sal wys. Goed, so waar kry julle hierdie verslag? Baie maklik, julle log in op Logix. Logix se adres is Logix. Iets toch wat my daar terug gaan. Daarbo staan die webadres, so julle kan net daarna toe gaan. As julle dalk bietjie julle login en passwords vergeet het, dan kan julle daar op die groen knoppie daarbo, daai hulplyn knoppie druk en net vra dat hulle dit weer vir julle stuur. Maar as julle nog nooit Logix gebruik het nie, dan kan julle net op daai blokkie daaronder registreer as 'n nuwe gebruiker. As jy daar klik, gaan hy net vir jou 'n vormpie opbring wat jy moet invul en dan sal hulle julle registreer op die stelsel en vir julle dan julle login en paswoord stuur. Goed, as julle dan ingelog is, dan kyk julle daarbo by daai hoopies, klik julle op verslae en dan op administratiewe verslae. En dan gaan julle na kleinvee toe en dan die eerste opsie onder kleinvee is dan die kleinvee kudde verslag. So as jy daar gaan klik, dan gaan hy 'n opsie opbring, daai boksie wat dan vir jou kan wys, hy is op 10 jaar se data gestel, maar dan kan jy hom gaan verander soos wat jy graag dit dan wil sien. Nou hierdie verslag word dan in die agtergrond gegenereer, so as jy 'n baie groot kudde het en jy het baie jare gekies wat moet ingesluit word, dan gaan dit nou 'n ou rukkietjie neem om al die verwerkings en die goeders te doen. Hierdie verslag word dan per e-pos na jou toe gestuur, maar dit behoort dan binne 'n uur of 2 in jou e-posboksie te verskyn. Ek wil net hierdie dan mooi vir julle verduidelik, want ons gebruik dit om die fenotipiese inligting van julle kuddes te beskryf vir elke eienskap. Nou hierdie is liggaamsgewig by 'n wolras wat op 'n jaar ouderdom geneem word. Die grys blokkie wys vir jou wat is die variasie van die kudde. Dit is vir jou aktiewe diere van die kudde. So in hierdie betrokke kudde is daar dan nou 'n variasie van die minimum 14 kg tot die maksimum van 54 kg. Die donker lyntjie is die gemiddeld van die aktiewe diere van jou kudde. So hierdie spesifieke kudde se gemiddeld is 31,3 kg en die gekleurde blokkie is 1 standaard afwyking rondom hierdie gemiddeld. So dit wys vir jou mooi, hoe is jou variasie in die kudde, en dan omdat ons met normaal verdeelde data werk, gaan daar omtrent 67% van jou diere binne in daai blokkie val. Die stippe lyntjie wys vir jou waar lê die rasse gemiddeld. Die rasse aktiewe gemiddeld. So jy kan sien hierdie kudde se gemiddeld op 31,3 kg en die ras op 37,8 kg. So die kudde is gemiddeld bietjie laer as die ras, maar dit beteken nie, die kudde is noodwendig swakker as die ras nie. Mens wil nie altyd noodwendig hê jou kudde moet baie hoë waardes nie, veral vir liggaamsgewig, waar jy hoor die liggaamsgewig, hoor is jou onderhoudsbehoeftes van die diere. So die optimale omstandighede van jou kudde word bepaal deur die omgewing. So goed wat aangespreek gaan word, is dan 'n beskrywing van hoe jou aktiewe kudde op die stadium lyk. Ons gaan kyk na die produksiestatus van jou kudde, die fenotypiese en genetiese vlakke van jou kudde. Fenotypies beteken die meting self, soos wat julle dit neem. Dan kyk ons ook bietjie na inteling, ons gee reproduksie opsomming, ons wys jou fenotypiese en genetiese tendense, met ander woorde, hoe het jou kudde se metings en ook die genetiese vlakke oor tyd verander. Ons wys die huidige ouderdomverspreiding van jou kudde, ons wys jou uitskootredes en dan is daar ook lekker aksielyste wat jou vinnig kan help om jou administrasie van jou kudde bietjie op datum te kry. Goed, ek gaan dan oorgee nou aan Jason en hy gaan nou vir julle in meer detail deur hierdie hele verslag werk. Jason, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bernice. Hi, everyone. My name's Jason. I'm a geneticist at SA Studbook. Ek is meer Engels as ek Afrikaans is, so I will be presenting this part of tonight in English, but I hope that I can get you to understand what's going on in this report. Okay, so go back one, Bernice. I'll say. Okay, so this report is quite comprehensive for each of your flocks, depending on what breed you are breeding with or with how long you've been a breeder for. This report can be anywhere from 30 to 50 pages long. So the first time you have a look at it, please, you might be wondering what's going on. So that's what we're here today to go through. So here, the first term I want you to focus on is active versus historical. So do you see this page says active flock summary? So this is a snapshot of what is currently indicated on Logix as being alive on your farm. This is what we call the dashboard, and you can see there are a few robot lights as well. But let's start on the left there. So on the left, under registration status, that indicates what the total number of animals that this breeder has currently alive on his farm, and that's 1,327 animals. And I always compare it with the breed. So do you see that the breed, this breed, has 270,757 active animals currently on Logix, of which 152,000 of them are registered, 79,000 are recorded, and 38,000 are currently lamb book. So we give you your flock, and then we give you the breed, because you can use this to benchmark your flock against what's happening in the breed. So keep that word benchmark in mind with this report. We also then give your average inbreeding in comparison to the breed, and you can see that the two lights are green. So that means that this flock is equal or better or in line than what's happening with the breed. So there's nothing going on too bad there. Then we've got the active animals on farm, and we've split it into less than 2 years and greater than 2 years. You can see that it's mainly females that are active. So that's what we are reporting there. And then lastly, the counts of the active animals. We can see that it's 1,327, but it's a split of around 70% females and 30% males. Then on the right is the level of production recording. Once again, I've presented your flocks, your active flock, so all the alive animals, how many are measured and what's their average, and then to benchmark you against the breed. So if we look at weaning weight, of the 1,327 animals in this flock, 1,145 of them are measured for weaning weight, with the average of 29.8 kgs, and that is 2 kgs more than the breed. So he is equal or better than the breed average when it comes to weaning weight. We also split it up into your singles, your twins, and your triplets, because we know that their rearing status will have an effect on their phenotype for their weaning weight. We give you all the other traits. There are a lot of wool traits here. So if you are a breeder that is breeding with a Dormer or a Meat Master, you won't get these wool traits, but we do show them for the breeds that do have these traits. And then just have a look at the robot. This breeder is green for all the traits, meaning that he is equal or better than average. But there where he is orange, that's worse than breed average. Let's have a look at his body weighted wool test. He's 43.6 kgs average, but the breed is 47.4. So his average body weight is below the breed average, but he's still within one standard deviation. So he is within the average. If it was red, then that average is way below the first standard deviation, and his phenotype is in the bottom 30% of the breed. So just keep that in mind with these robots. If it's green and orange, you are right there with the breed. If there's red, that's an area of focus that you can improve on. Next slide. So you saw with the tables, we are summarizing it, but on the next page in the report, we visualize the variance that Bernice indicated earlier. So if we look at weaning weight, which is the second block with the blue block in the middle, this breeder's minimum weaning weight in his flock at the moment is 15 kgs, and he had a maximum of 53 kgs. He's above average for weaning weight. The solid line is his herd's flock average, and the dotted line is the breed average. So you can always refer back to the previous page to see what's the breed average, but we can see that this breeder, apart from clean fleece weight and fiber diameter, his average is close to the breed average, and the majority of his animals are around the breed average as well. But with clean fleece weight, we see there his average is 2.6, but the breed's average is above the first standard deviation. So this breeder's clean fleece weight is actually lower than what we are seeing in the breed, and his average flock is also lower than the breed. So his clean fleece weight is potentially an area of improvement phenotypically, but the environment may be having an effect. So if we look at the genetic window, we can actually have a slight comparison there between what is genetically happening and what is phenotypically happening. So if we look genetically at clean fleece weight, this breeder, his average is 103. Remember, 100 for a breeding index is the average. So his herd's average is 3 index points above average for clean fleece weight. But we see phenotypically he produces a lot smaller or a lot lighter clean fleece weights than on average. So that tells me that the environment is having a major influence on how that clean fleece weight is being expressed phenotypically. He has the genetics for it, but the environment is restricting that clean fleece weight. But I can also see that his fiber diameter is extremely thin or fine in comparison to the breed, and that there is a correlation between fiber diameter and clean fleece weight. The lower the fiber diameter, the smaller the clean fleece weight. The higher the fiber diameter, the higher the clean fleece weight. So clean fleece weight for this breeder is his area of improvement, and you can use this window. You will see this breeder does not measure birth weight, That's why it says no birth weight. There are no birth weight records for this breeder, so I cannot produce the phenotypic window. Next slide. So we give you the active, but some of you might want to look at your historical flock average. So this table, this is one of my favorite pages on the report and is always where I look to see, has this person made phenotypic progress over the years? So this breeder, if we look at the first column that says total flock count. So in this breeder's breeding history, he has measured 5,568 male animals for weaning weight, and their average was 29 kgs. The next one is active flock. Active flock is what are the current animals on his farm that are measured for weaning weight, and that's 412 animals, and their average is 30.7. So the animals that he has kept and selected to be used for breeding are on average 1.7 kgs heavier than his flock's historical average. So this breeder is selecting heavier weaning lambs. If we look at the females, you can see there's a bigger difference. So there were 5,765 females on his farm measured for weaning weight, of which the average is 27.8 kgs. But his current ewe flock, the active one, there are only 733 females active, but their average is 29.3 kgs. So this breeder's current active female population is on average 1.5 kgs heavier than his historical or total flock. So you can see that the animals that he is breeding with, which traits you have selected for phenotypically, if they are greater on average than what has been historically happening in your flock. And then we also give you the total breed average. So that's the total breed average over all the animals ever measured, and the active breed average. So all the animals that are currently indicated as alive, what is their average? And you can see the direction that the breed has been going in. Have they been selecting for heavier clean fleece weights, thicker fiber diameter, heavy weaning weight? So this table is a short summary of your entire history as well as your current animals that you are breeding with. Next slide. Okay. So those all summarize your phenotypes, but we also, as Dr. Badnies indicated, present a lot of other information in this report. So this one is the inbreeding coefficient trend. When looking at these trend graphs, it is important to look at the x-axis. So the x-axis here says year of birth. That means that's the average inbreeding coefficient of the animals born within that year. So the red line, the solid red line, is the breed's average. So you can see that that's the breed's average inbreeding from 2017 to 2026, the average per birth year. And it stayed relatively stable. So this breed is managing its inbreeding. The animals are not having a spike in their inbreeding. But pay attention to this breeder. He is the green and blue line. I'll explain the difference between them. But do you see in 2024, he had a jump in his inbreeding? Because the parents of the animals that were born in 2024 were related to each other. And the inbreeding increased. And then he saw, oh, my inbreeding increased. So he had to identify maybe some rams that were not as related to his ewes. He used them. And then we see that drop in his inbreeding for all the ewes or for all the lambs that were born in 2025. So you can use this trend to see the years where you may have used breeding parents that were related, or when you lowered your inbreeding by using unrelated animals. The difference between the green and the blue line is if you buy an animal from another breeder and you use it, that animal was not born in your flock, but he currently does represent your flock's average. So the green line will include your flock as well as any animals that you bought from other flocks, while the blue line is just the animals that were born in your flock. So this breeder hasn't actually brought in another ram from another flock in the last 10 years. So this breeder is line breeding, but by using the inbreeding calculator available on Logix, he has minimized his inbreeding by ensuring he is mating the unrelated animals. He is not mating the related animals together. And just to understand your inbreeding coefficients, at the bottom we have a table. So it gives you the expected average inbreeding coefficient of an animal. If it was mated to its own parent, then it would be 25% inbreed. If you mated a half brother and a half sister together, that lamb would be 12.5% inbred. And you can see with full siblings, that's the same as an animal being mated to its own parent. The recommended maximum threshold is 6.25%. And as you can see, this breed and the breeder himself is below that. So this person is managing their inbreeding. I see that there is a question in the chat. Dr. Bernice, let's go back to the last slide. And the question is from Tertius. If you purchase, how can you confirm if not related? Bernice, can you help with answering that question?
Yes, we have ons het 'n funksie op Logix waar jy jou inteling kan gaan beraam. So as jy 'n ram inkoop, dan kan jy daai funksie gebruik. Al jou oeye gaan kies, of wat jy die oeye wat jy aan hom wil blootstel kies, en dan hom daarop sit, en dan dan werk dit vir jou uit wat die inteling gaan wees van daai spesifieke parings.
Bernice, do you know where specifically on Logix that inbreeding calculator is? And then I can type it into the chat and people can go there.
Ja, dit is, as jy ingelog het op Logix, gaan jy na algemeen toe. Nee, jy gaan kort paaie, algemeen, en dit sal daar onder wees intelingsberekeninge of so ietsie.
Yeah. So you said kort paaie, algemeen?
Algemeen. Berekening van inteling, ja, jy sal sien, daar staan iets van inteling.
Okay, thank you. I have placed the path in the chat so everyone can have a look. Thank you, Bernice, and thank you, Tertius. I see you gave a thumbs up. Okay, next slide, Bernice. There are a few pages that also summarize the spread of your animals on farm. So this one just shows the total active animals. So these are all the animals that are alive on this breeder's farm according to the Logix system. The oldest animal is born in 2017, and you can see the nice trend that all the majority of the animals on this breeder's farm are all the 23, 24, 25 lambs. Some of them are potentially maiden ewes, and some of them are the lambs that were just born. They haven't been weaned, and he's still going to put them through a wool test. And most of the wool tests occur around a year of age, and then selection occurs after that. So that just shows the nice spread of your animals on your farm. Next slide. But this one then splits it between your males and your females. So then we can see that the oldest animal is actually a male from 2017. It must be a nice ram that this breeder has kept around. There are no males from 2018, 2019, or 2020, and there are just a few males from 21 and 22. So those are the males that he has retained for breeding. The 23 and 24s, those are potentially the rams that he's going to sell. And 25, that's the latest group of ram lambs that he has on his farm. But do you see the spread for the females is a lot better? The 2018, 19, 20, 21 ewes, those are his breeding ewes that he's kept around. And then we see the spike up with all the younger lambs that he's probably still selecting. Maybe he still needs to update logics on which animals he sold or which ones he culled. So this just tells us what is the current spread of the animals on logics. Next slide. Yeah. So we look at what animals are currently alive, but we can also have a look at how are these animals born? So the birth status of the animals born on your farm. For the small stock, we know that twinning and triplets and quadruplets are common. So we just indicate this, and we can see that for the majority of the years, most of the animals that were born on this breeder's farm were twins. 51% of the lambs born are born as twins, 44% are born as singles, and 4% are born as triplets. So you can, if you see, I break the bar graph up into a few bars. The green is the singles, the orange is the twins, the purple is the triplets, and the blue is the quadruplets. But if you look at 2023 specifically, 294 singles, 275 twins, 35 triplets, and there's a number there that says 4. So he had one set of quadruplets, this breeder. So you can use to see this is, are you registering your lambs as singles, twins, or triplets correctly? And then it's a nice visual to see what is the proportion on your farm instead of you having to do the math on an Excel spreadsheet. Just druk this report on Logix and we summarize it for you. Next slide. Okay. So this one is your reproduction summary. So we have a look at how many female animals were born in that year, and then how many of them have an age at first lambing, how many have an interlambing period 1, and how many have an interlambing period 2. So we can see on average between 2017 and 2021, around 300 females are being born every year. And then in 2022, he had a spike of 400 females, and then it's come back down to around 300. So the gray block is the total number of ewes that were born. And then the pink block is how many of them have a lamb on the Logix system or have an age at first lambing. So if we look at 2021, do you see, I then tell you in the bottom left corner that 38% of the ewes that were born in 2021 gave birth to a lamb. So in that 2021 year, his ewe retention rate, or his maiden ewe, he kept 38% of the ewes and bred with them. Then in 2022, there was a bit of a dip. Only 29% of the ewes that were born gave birth, and then 31% of the ewes in 2023 have given birth. So this gives an indication of what is your breeding rate. How many of the ewes that were born, how many of them do you keep? This differs obviously between years. Maybe some years are a drought year, or maybe one year you used a ram, but none of the ewes that he produced were suitable to you to keep breeding with, and we can pick up these traits. Next slide. We then also summarize the age at first lambing in a phenotype trend. Remember, this is the average age at first lambing. So if we look at the top one, look at the dotted line. So the dotted line at the bottom is the minimum age at first lambing within that flock. And the top one is the maximum age at first lambing. So you can see that this breeder, his minimum and his maximum are quite close to each other. So this breeder is very strict on when the age at first lambing should be. But if we can see that there are some years that pop out, like 2019 and 2020, there's a little bit of an up. So some of the ewes lambed a little bit later. And then in 2021, he had a ewe lamb at 11 months of age. So that minimum, that can just be 1 or 2 animals. But have a look at the red and the blue line. So the red line is the breed average, and the blue line is the flock average. And this breeder is actually quite close to the breed average. But then some of you might be thinking, what's that gray block that's going around the blue line? The gray block is the first standard deviation. So the first standard deviation is where 65% of the animals, that's where their age at first lambing is. So do you see how in 2017 and 2018, the 65% of his ewes, do you see how small the standard deviation is? The majority of his ewes were lambing close to the average. But then 2019, do you see where the average goes up a little bit? Because we also see that the maximum age at first lambing also went up. And do you see how the gray block gets wider? So the standard deviation is wider because there was more variation in his age at first lambing in 2019. But from 2021, 22, 23, he got that standard deviation back much closer to his average. So we can see here that in 2019, 2020, and 2021, he relaxed his breeding decision on age at first lambing a little bit. But then in 2022, 2023, he went back to being very strict. And he's on par with the breed average. So go have a look at your phenotypic trend for age at first lambing. You might see some outliers. That's what we call these maximum and minimum animals that are causing a bit more variation. Those are outliers. Then in the bottom, we look at when are your lambs born and how many are born in that month. And then if we can summarize your lambing season. So I can see that this breeder has 2 distinct lambing seasons. He has September to November, where the majority of his lambs are falling on the ground. And then he has a second lambing season from March to May. But then do you see in 2022, as well as 23 and 25, some of the ewes, but a very small amount, less than 20, lambed outside of that breeding season. But what it looks like with 2022 is that he shifted his breeding season forward 1 month. So instead of the majority of the lambs coming in April, in 2022, the majority of the lambs in the second breeding season came in May. So we can use this to see where your breeding season is. And keep in mind that when you define your contemporary group for weaning weight or for pre-wean, you can use this lambing season to identify your contemporary group. So just keep that one in mind when it comes to this, when your lambs are being born in your flock. Next slide. So we're talking a lot about reproduction at the moment. So as I said, this is a very comprehensive report. Some of the pages are a repeat of the information, but we are presenting potentially a different kind of information. So in this one, it's your females again, but this time we split them into your maiden ewes and your ewes. So a ewe is a ewe that has had a lamb. A maiden ewe is a lamb that has not yet given a lamb. And what's important here is there are 9 maiden ewes in 2022 that are still active on his farm, but they've never had a lamb registered against them. In my mind, those 9 ewes are not on the farm, and this breeder has not cancelled them. Why is it important to cancel these 9 maiden ewes? Because you as stud breeders are charged a per capita invoice for the number of animals that you have on your farm. So if your admin is not up to date, we are potentially invoicing you for animals that aren't actually on your farm. So you can use this to easily identify. But wait, there's a ewe in 2020 that logic says is a maiden ewe. You can go find that ewe, and then you go, but that ewe is no longer on my farm, and you can cancel her. Why do I say that? I'll tell you on the next slide. There's a list of maiden ewes that we can have a look at. The bottom one indicates the distribution of the active females. So the red line is the breed, and the blue line is the flock. So this breeder has a lot more younger ewes in his flock that represents his flock. Then the younger ewes represent the breed. So this potentially, as I said, with these 9 maiden ewes from 2022, I think this breeder needs to do a little bit of admin and cancel animals on Logix that are currently active, but are not actually active on his farm. How do we identify these maiden ewes? Next slide. We give you a list. So this breeder, remember we said there are 9 ewes from 2022 that might be maiden ewes. The top 3 are indicating those 3 ewes. They are 45 and 44 months of age. So they are past the age at first lambing average within this herd and may actually be outside of the minimum breed standards for a breed. So you can use this list because according to Logix, these animals are still alive, but on your farm they may be dead. So you can use this list to identify animals that you can cancel. So these 3 ewes, I would assume, need to be cancelled, or maybe they did have a lamb, but for some reason the lamb notification has not been sent to Logix. So go have a look at that first ewe, the oldest one. Go have a look. Did she have a lamb? No, I culled her, but she's still active on Logix. Go cancel that animal on Logix. Next slide. Here we also give you the ewes with days since last lambing greater than a year. We know with the sheep that on average, you guys are lambing them every year. Some are doing 3 lambings over 2 years, but the majority of breeders are doing 1 lamb a year. But have a look at this first ewe. The last time she lambed was 1,523 days ago. That's about 8 years ago. So this female is still active on Logix, but she hasn't lambed. So she is also, her days since last lambing is also skewing the average days since last lambing for this flock, because the majority of the animals will be around 250 to 300 days, depending on how far away we are from your lambing season. But these ewes, 1,500, in my mind, those animals are dead, but you haven't cancelled them yet on Logix. So you can use this list to identify the females that are long gone from your flock, but may still be indicated as active on Logix. Next slide. Okay, so we spoke about a few averages, the number of animals on your farm, the number of females. Are there maiden females? How many days since last lambing is the average female expressing? But we also summarize all of your measurements. Sorry, I'm just drinking some water. So here we have the total number of animals born and the total number of measurements taken. So we can see here that on average, this breeder measures 89% of his lambs that are born for weaning weight. That's quite high. That tells me that this breeder has around 11% lamb mortality, or there are a few lambs that he thought, you know what, I'm not even going to let this lamb get to wean. I can see that it's a weak lamb. So this breeder is measuring the majority of his animals that are born for weaning weight. That's a very good average, 89%. I see some flocks with 35%. That's telling me that this breeder is only measuring the animals that he keeps. What about all the other animals that you didn't keep? Why didn't you keep them? Were they poor weaning animals? We also need that weaning information of the poor animals. And then this breeder is a wool breeder. So after weaning, he will select his animals and he will send them off for a wool test. So I can see here that 58% of the animals that are born are measured for a wool test. So this breeder is keeping 60% of his lambs that are born all the way to 1 year of age. And you can see that after weaning, he throws away around 20 to 30% of the poor weaner lambs. They don't make it to the wool test. But I'm a little bit worried about 2025 because a lot of animals have been measured for weaning weight, but we have not yet received the majority of those animals wool tests. So we could still be waiting for a few of the wool tests to come back for the lambs that are born in 2025. Next slide. So the first one was all the animals, and then I split it into your rams and your ewes. So it's the same as the previous one, but this one is just for male animals. Here, 95% of the male animals that were born each year are measured for weaning weight. And then we see 58% of males that are born on the farm are measured for a wool test. Next slide. And then here the females. Only 84% of the females are measured for weaning weight, but the same number, 58%, are measured for a wool test. So in the first slide, where it was all the animals, it said 89% of all the animals. But then I can see, okay, he measures 94% of his males and only 84% of his females. So we can also see the difference. Are you prioritizing measuring your males? And are you not measuring your females? Or are your females and your males close to each other? So we can also see which breeders are only measuring their male animals and which ones are not measuring any of their animals. So just keep that in mind with this report. Next slide. Then we also summarize your weaning weights in a trend. As I did with that age at first lambing, the dotted lines are the minimum and the maximum. So do you see this breeder has a nice minimum and maximum for his male animals moving around. The red line is the breed average, the blue line is the flock average, and the gray line is the first standard deviation, where 65% of the animals are being measured for weaning weight. So do you see how the standard deviation is moving very nicely with the average? As the average goes up and down, the standard deviation goes up and down as well. And so does the maximum and the minimum. So that can also tell me that 2023 was not as good of a year for his lambs on weaning weight as it was for 2022. 2022 was the best year for this breeder for his weaning weight. Have a look at the females. Do you see there in 2025, there's an outlier or of an uitskieter. There was a female on his farm that measured above 60 kgs for weaning weight. That's just potentially 1 or 2 animals. That's why it's important to look at the gray block. The gray block is where 65% of your animals are performing for weaning weight. What's important to keep in mind is that below the gray, so if you look at the gray block and you take the bottom of the gray block to the minimum. So any animal that is under that gray block, that only represents 17% of your flock. But that 17% is your worst performing animals for weaning weight. So you can see that this farmer, if I take a look at 2020, in 2020, the average was around 30 kgs, and his bottom of his 65% is around 22 kgs. So all the animals that weighed less than 22 kgs, that's the bottom 20% of the flock. Those are the animals that you would get rid of. So you can keep this to see, have you made phenotypic progress over the last 10 years? This breeder's average has kind of stayed around 30 kgs. So the environment is dictating that the average lamb on his farm will be 30 kgs. But do you see that the minimum for 2026 is 20, while for the other years, it was less than 20? Sorry, I'm just muting this person. Thank you. Thank you, Johan. You just joined. Welcome. Yeah, so I said in 2026, his minimum is a little bit higher, and 2025. So do you see this breeder? His minimum is getting better. So just keep that in. And also for his ewes, do you see how this minimum line has increased over the last 10 years? So he is getting rid of the poorer weaner lambs. Keep that in mind when looking at these trends. Next slide. Here we've got for clean fleece weight. So this breeder has, on average, a smaller clean fleece weight than the breed. Do you see how the breed, the red line, is above the gray blocky? So the average animal in this flock, 80% of the animals in this flock have a clean fleece weight that is smaller than the breed average. So just keep that in mind with this one. We can see that there has been some progress from 2017. He was just above 2. Now he's between 2 and 3. So he's increased his average clean fleece weight by around 300 grams. There was a good year in 2020, but it came back down a little bit, and it seems to be stabilizing around 2.5 for his males and around 2.4 for his females. But you can see here, even in 2019, look at 2019 with the females. In 2019, the entire flock gave, for the females, gave a clean fleece weight that was lower than the average of the breed. So you just keep that in mind when looking at the red, blue, and the gray lines. Next slide. Then we have the fiber diameter, and now it's starting to make sense to me. The breeder has on average a smaller clean fleece weight than the breed, but look at his fiber diameter. On average, his animals have a smaller fiber diameter. This breeder is giving finer wool. And do you see that for the male animals, that the breed is on average having a thicker fiber diameter than the majority of this breeder's flock. This flock, that standard deviation, is the maximum standard deviation is below the breed average. So this breeder has an extremely fine wool flock, and he is below the breed average phenotypically for the majority of his animals. The same can almost be said for his female animals. We see where the fiber diameter went up in 2021. That's the only time that that breed average is crossing over with his standard deviation. And then it came back down. So yes, this breeder may have smaller, clean fleece weights, but he is getting a better micron for his wool traits. Next slide. Okay, I think we're almost at the end of this. There's 2 more slides, I think. So I've been talking about canceling your animals. When you cancel your animal, there are a variety of codes, and we ask that you please start recording these animals a lot more accurately with these codes. So you see there are 2. There's voluntary and involuntary. So voluntary is when the animal voluntarily went out of the flock. Whether you sold the animal, you culled the animal because the animal did not meet your standards, it was out of the flock, you sold it commercially, maybe the society canceled the animal based on the per capita, and then the lambs lost before weaning. This is a very important production recording for you as breeders. If the lamb died before weaning and you think this is now going to penalize the ewe, we have catered for this. Do you see there it says lambs lost before weaning? And the breed, there are a few animals. If you indicate to Logix that this lamb was lost before weaning, we will not penalize the ewe as much as a lamb that was lost before weaning or you didn't measure the animal. So please use that. Maybe Bernice can indicate once I'm done here what that code looks like when people are canceling animals. And then the second category is involuntary. The animals that you lost because they died or a predator took them. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe they didn't have reproduction in time. They are non-compliant with the society. They were not inspected before the age of 24 months. There are a variety of ways that the animal can leave the system. And we depend on you as breeders to tell us how these animals are actually leaving your flock. So please use this table to see where the animals you've previously cancelled are being allocated as being cancelled. And if you want to improve this admin on your side, there are other reasons that are maybe more applicable to a specific animal. Next slide. So yes, today's records become tomorrow's genetic gain. Accurate, complete, and consistent recording is the cornerstone of sustainable sheep breeding. I hope you have seen that the Logix flock analysis of die Kudde Analyse is a great report for you as breeders to see, are the measurements that I am recording on Logix being recorded accurately? How many of my animals am I actually measuring? Are all the animals on my farm that are active, are they represented as active on the Logix system? And if there are any animals that you don't agree with as being active on Logix but are dead on your farm, you can use this report as you can quickly go and look and see, oh no, there's that ewe, I need to cancel her. So please use this flock analysis to assist you in your current stud breeding practices, and it might actually reveal something in your flock that you may not currently be aware of. You can use this report to benchmark your phenotype against the breed average, and you can have a look at where are you potentially not measuring a trait and the other breeders are measuring a trait. Thank you. If you have any questions, Now's the time to ask. Please just stick up your hand or type something in the chat box. Both myself, Dr. Bernice, and Gerdus are here to assist. Thank you.